Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 220 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try StrengthCoach.com out for 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renda, and the show notes are located at ContinueFit.com. That's where I keep all my podcasts. A quick reminder about the success series that I did, 5 audio interviews on achieving success in the fitness business. Sign up, it's free. Check it out. Let me know what you think. All right, today on the Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about the healthy scratch workout. That's a thread that got a lot of traction on the site. Also, another thread called the Fragile Generation that was inspired by an article of the same name. For the Results Fitness Business of Fitness segment, Rachel Cosgrove is on to discuss vision and the bigger picture. For the Functional Movement System segment, Eric DeGotti continues his 3-part series about foot positions called The Power of 3. For the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, I have on, again, Dr. Stuart McGill and international powerlifting champion Brian Carroll. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. They just released their book, The Gift of Injury. Today we talk about bone callousing and remodeling, neural drive and why smiling doesn't help it, torso bracing, using speed for neural drive, general programming, and Brian's thoughts on what he would have changed about his training from the past. Also, Dr. McGill is offering a 10% discount for my listeners. The code is BFPFriends. That's BFPFriends. That code is good at backfitpro.com. Also have a link at continuefit.com. Today, sorry about the sound. Actually, on Coach Boyle's interview, I used a different headset, and we have a new platform for recording. Also, for the McGill interview, I'm not sure, there was some background noise. If you've listened to the one last time, you heard it. So we'll have that fixed for the next episode. All right, lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the Coach's Corner and the StrengthCoach.com Q&A. Remember, we do the Q&A on StrengthCoach.com every 2 weeks. We're kind of combining these two things. Coach, thanks for doing this.
No problem. Day before Thanksgiving. I'm almost done with work.
All right. I got a long way to go. So, cool. Coach, let's start out. We sent out a newsletter yesterday. We got a lot of this is a really interesting thread, the healthy scratch workout. And, again, I didn't really think it would be a big deal, but there are so many factors that you guys have. And this isn't just for hockey, but obviously it's centered around a little bit around hockey. But, there's also guys don't play in every sport. So, is there back-to-back games? Are they off the next day, as opposed to like a Friday or Saturday? Were they involved in a pre-game skate or any kind of warm-ups where they dress and then it's a game time decision that they're not playing? Is it home or away? What equipment will be available? Should we condition? Should we lift? Should we just do power? Talk to us about your philosophy on this idea of healthy scratches.
Well, I thought the interesting thing was that we had to, the first thing I did was define healthy scratch, because the first thing that came to my mind was that, okay, all the non-hockey people are going to have no idea. And there was somebody who posted way down in the thread, gee, learned something as usual. I didn't want to hear about the term scratch.
Yes.
And I'm sure we should probably throw it out there. I'd love to know what the soccer term is. There's probably some English term for the guy who doesn't play.
Yeah.
Games and what you do with those guys. It's probably way nicer too. Competitors or something instead of. But so I guess, as I said, there's a bunch of things when you start looking at that, and it's funny. Like, it was an interesting question to me because, like with many things, I immediately have the answer. I know exactly what I would do in that particular situation. But then you think about it and you realize, but it actually depends on, as you said, 4 or 5 different variables. Does this kid, do we anticipate he's going to play on Saturday, but not on Friday? That's the biggest variable. Am I going to need that guy available the night before? sometimes we have had it happen where we've really worked the kid hard and then someone got hurt and suddenly we think, well, you're going to have to play. Yeah. And you may not be that excited about it, but you're going to have to play anyway. And the kid is usually that excited because they're going to be in the lineup. So that's the one good thing, that adrenaline always takes care of anything that you might have potentially done wrong. Yep. But for us, it was always the fact, okay, those guys are healthy scratches. And I didn't say this in the thread, but they always warmed up with the team. They always warmed up as if they were going to play. And then once the guys started getting ready, once they left to get ready to go and get dressed for the game, the guys who weren't playing stayed, did their lift. And as I said, for us, generally speaking, the Friday lift would be a little bit more iffy. Saturday was like, okay, no one who doesn't play Saturday, we're not worried about them. They're off the next day, so we can go as hard, as heavy as we want. It doesn't have to be more power-oriented. We don't have to worry about lower volume. We don't have to worry about if that guy's going to play again. Friday night, we might be a little bit more careful. But again, there are some guys that kind of know, like, okay, unless there's a natural disaster out there where a whole line gets hurt, then more than likely I'm not in. I'm not the first guy up. It's not going to be one of those situations. So those guys will tend to know they have to work hard. The interesting thing I thought was Tim Caron's view was very different. It was kind of interesting to have someone kind of chime in with what they did with football, and probably to admit that he pushed his guys way too hard in some of those Friday workouts before a Saturday game. But we had kind of a similar philosophy. Even in football, we put our guys on a 4-day program. Everybody was on a 3-day program. Red shirts, freshmen, people that transferred, whatever, they were on a 4-day program, and they always lifted Fridays of home games. They had that kind of day 4 workout that we just, sometimes in that case, we had to cobble that workout together a little bit in terms of picking up the pieces and figuring out, even when you think about filling buckets, okay, what didn't we do this week with that guy? And I think that's kind of what that Friday workout became for us too, because generally at BU, our guys would most of the time work out either Sunday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, which would mean when the game came on Friday, they could pretty much do anything. And as I said, we'd stick to our standard template, some kind of power exercise. We might snatch, we might dumbbell snatch, we might hang clean, and then some sort of upper body push with a knee dominant, some sort of upper body pull with a hip dominant. And obviously the same idea, try setting it, sprinkling some core and stuff in there. And it was interesting. If you look at Devon's was sort of exactly that, with a little bit of variation, probably a little more emphasis of that velocity-based idea. And then going back and saying, again, probably really, really similar from a concept, a design standpoint. And then other people were very different. So I think, and that Craig was interesting. Craig chimed in, thinking, well, should it be more power-oriented? And again, I probably think, on the Friday workout. And again, I hate to sound like my man Darreletto. Darreletto's answer used to be to everything, well, Mike, it depends. And I'd be like, it can't depend. I need an answer. I don't want it depends. But you realize that it does, in fact, depend a lot of times on as I said, a bunch of variables. And most logically, is that person going to play on the weekend?
Yeah. I've heard some great.
And this is what I said. And that was a question. That was a guy who joined, new member, sent that to me. We send that new member email out. Do you have anything that you're interested in? And he said, I want to know about training goalies and about what to do with my healthy scratch guys. I said, get on the advanced form and post that on there. And I've been trying to do that more with guys to encourage more form interaction, because I still think people don't utilize that feature enough. They don't look at this and think, the reality is, it's like, I can get Mike to answer any question that I want, no matter how stupid, because I am going to answer every question that goes up there. And I don't know why more people don't do it. And it's that we talk about the whole idea, you don't want to look stupid, blah, 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 but you're paying for it.
Yeah.
Put it up there.
Yeah, and what's cool is you have Craig Edwards from UNH. He chimes in. Sean Skane from the Minnesota Wild. Devin McConnell from UMass Lowell. Anthony Donskov, who, his brother, obviously it's his brother, but Anthony comes with a huge hockey background. I think he even played semi-professionally, right? Tim Caron.
He played
at
Miami of Ohio.
Yes.
He's got a huge amount of experience. Just finished writing a book on
That's right.
training for ice hockey. So that's what you're right. It's unbelievable. And then a guy like Tim, who was at Army, and chimes in and says, "Hey, this is what we did for football." So sometimes I I don't know. I guess I don't get it. I always look at people and think, wow, why not throw it out there? The worst thing that could happen is someone would say, wow, that's a really stupid question, but no one ever does.
Yeah, now it ended up being such a great thread that we actually had threw that in there in the newsletter as well. Coach, let's move on to this is an old article, but you kind of changed it around. It was one that our friend Dewey Nielsen had written called "Being Brilliant at the Basics: Training the MMA Athlete," and you kind of came upon it and decided, no, this is good for training elite athletes. Be brilliant at the basics. Just go over this really quick.
Yeah, and what I realized actually was that we had not put that on the site yet, which surprised me. And I must have done it on my blog years ago when somebody asked me that question and said, hey, Dewey's article is so good. What I felt on the site is that people see titles and then they don't read articles. So someone sees MMA and thinks, I'm not interested in MMA. I'm a hockey strength coach. I'm a football strength coach. But we would always talk about that idea of being brilliant at the basics. And I love Dewey's idea about brilliant at the basics. So I emailed him and said, hey, I'm going to edit your article. I'm going to take all the MMA references out of it. And really the only MMA references were the words MMA.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there at all about the fact that it would, have anything to do with combat sports except for the word in the title. So I just went in and plucked the words out. But I like having it on the site because now because it's always that same question that, that Marco Cardinale thing, my sport's different. No, it's not. Your guy's ability to do a split squat, and to do a one leg squat, and to do a one leg straight leg, to do a chin up and to do a bench press, none of that is different. I don't care. I literally don't care what sport you coach. If you are talking about, I want to have a strength program, then you're going to have to get good at those things. You're going to have to be, as Dewey said, brilliant at the basics.
Yep. The foundation really for any sport, including golf, is always going to be the same. And Dewey, I think that's the point in the article that he really was trying to get across, because I think there was, at the time, was when MMA was really just starting to come up. That article's from 2008. It was just starting to come up, right? And everybody was always like, MMA. And that was kind of him saying, all right, settle down now. This is what you need.
Yeah, exactly. But as you said, even golf, and I don't care. We just had a thread on there about dancers today.
Yes.
I don't care. It's going to be fundamentally the same with everybody that you deal with. And then there's going to be those little kind of, it depends, bucket filling. And so what I find is we probably have to, I haven't looked at what the top 10 articles are in a long time, but I start thinking about the ones that we refer to the most. And I think brilliant at the basics should be in that top 10. Does it hurt should be in the top 10. Bucket filling should be in the top 10, because those are the ones I find myself always linking to and saying, and it's amazing how many times I saw somebody else's presentation and they started talking about the buckets. People are always like, well, you got to think about the bucket idea. And it's like the bucket idea is becoming like joint by joint, where it's so sort of ubiquitous that I don't get credit anymore, which I think is great. That's when you realize, okay, this has really made it. When you see these things that people just assume, like people say, well, you understand joint by joint approach, and then they do this. And you're kind of like, okay, this joint by joint idea has become so accepted that it's almost assumed to be true and that everybody understands what it is. And we're getting that way kind of with the bucket idea, where people say, well, you really got to think about the buckets. And probably people who aren't in our circle probably are like, you got to think about the buckets. What the hell are these guys talking about the buckets? So you've got to keep sending them back to the bucket filling article.
It's true. It's true. Good stuff. Coach, let's go over. You posted an article called the fragile. I keep wanting to say fragile, just like, because I was kidding, but the fragile generation, because I'm always like, fragile. The fragile generation. Tell us a little bit about this article and your thoughts on it.
Well, my father used to always say that all the stuff we got came from that Italian company. It would always come in the same boxes. Fragile, they made everything. And they were the Chinese of their day. But actually, Devin tweeted it, and then I read it, and then I brought it to the site. I just think it's really interesting, and I always I think everything relates to me, right? Everything always comes back to me. That's
It's all about you.
Yeah, it's all about me. Enough about you. Let's talk about me some more. But with kids, I think you're much more in touch with what's really going on, and that's this whole, people. I was talking to somebody. It might have been you who was saying, "I hate when people talk about millennials," but it was
I do.
What?
That was me. Yeah, I can't stand it.
But the reality is, and again, you were right. Don't blame the millennials. Blame the parents. Blame the pot smoking hippies who raised them. That's the problem. But I think that's the part that people don't look at. Like, hey, don't blame the millennials. The millennials are a byproduct of the pot smoking hippie, free love. Everybody deserves a free lunch. Everybody's a winner. Their parents raised those kids. And you got kids whose names are like Flower and Willow. All this stuff. It's like, yeah. And they're all the kids that are stuck at Stanford right now and can't understand. It's like, that's why I love the Simon Sinek thing. We need beanbags and snacks. That's what we need.
Yeah. Well, it's a damn rock and roll music that those hippies were listening to that ruined their generation.
Absolutely true. It was the television. And then before that, it was the radio. But what I think people don't see is that we've got radio and TV on steroids right now in terms of what is going on. And it goes back, I can go back to my my most likely to succeed book. Same idea. You're never going to be smarter than your phone. The information access, the access to everything is so drastically different. And so now we've got social media as a player in this thing, and we've got obviously parenting as a player in this thing. We've got lack of struggle, kind of second generation affluence. All of these things kind of roll into, and we do end up with a fragile generation. We end up with a bunch of kids who can't understand failure.
Mike, did you adjust what you were doing with your son who was younger than your daughter, like by 3 or 4 years, right? So did you adjust anything with Mark based, like in terms of some of these things?
Yes, absolutely. We were never as restrictive with Michaela about phone use, and because Snapchat didn't really exist until probably Michaela was in high school. Mark has Snapchat now. So now Mark has the ability to invisible message all of his friends. Everything disappears. That's a huge variable in terms of communication. With Michaela, we could go and look at her texts. You hate to say that, but you were able to go back. And this is like, I wish we could get rid of Snapchat. I would love to go back in time and say, okay, I wish Snapchat would go away. Because Snapchat to me is the biggest problem. Because again, it took, for the kid and the parent, it took, social media. Well, I can look at their Facebook page. I can make them, have to be friends with me. I can look at their tweets. And even now, what the big thing is? Finstagram, fake Instagram. So all the kids have fake Instagrams with fake names. And that's where they put up all the stuff they don't want their parents to see.
Wow.
So I know Michaela has 2 Instagram accounts. There's one, the sweet little Michaela Boyle with her Clarkson pictures. And then there's one that probably posts, the whatever, drunken Michaela Boyle on a Friday night with her friends pictures. I don't know, not that's necessarily true, but you realize, and she's like, oh, all the kids have them. And so even though the idea, parents think, oh, I know exactly what's going on. Like, not if you don't have the Finsta account, you really don't know what's going on. And if you're not on Snapchat with them, you don't know what's going on. I'm almost thinking about getting Snapchat and making Mark add me. I don't know. So you know what I mean? It's like, and then I think the reverse, when you had phone conversations when you were a kid, your parents didn't listen in. They didn't have like the NSA tapping the line and they could hear, oh, Anthony swore on there and he was talking about drinking. But you might have swore and you might have talked about drinking. So, and I guess that was sort of Elspeth's point, is that, hey, everything worked out fine for the previous generations, but I don't think we're factoring in kind of the exponential power of the internet. And that was the one thing when you look at, and it was either that Fragile Generation one or the next one that I posted, but they said these kids I can watch Mark's mood change based on a Snapchat. I can go from having a kid who was fine and dandy, smiling, having fun, to looking, and I've got a kid who's literally like sullen, sitting at the table, sulking.
Wow.
And think, like, what happened? Nothing. Yes, you did. You saw something on your phone that changed your mood. No, it didn't. Why does it always have to go back to my phone? And so, same fight, different. The ability to be excluded, the ability to be mean, all of these things have increased exponentially as a result of the internet, as a result of Snapchat, as a result of Instagram. And they're clearly showing links to behaviors from kids as a result of this stuff. So it's something, if nothing else, when you look at like strengthcoach.com, right? It's a coaching site. If you're coaching, you have to be social media savvy. You needed to do it before. We talked about it from a marketing standpoint. You got to be social media savvy from a marketing standpoint. But now you realize, as a parent, as a coach, as a teacher, you have to be social media savvy. There was just a thing here last night on TV where some guy was threatening kids, young girls, to Snapchat him nude photos. If you don't send me nude photos of yourself, I will do blank. And that was on the news last night. They're trying to find this guy. But do you know what I mean? Is it like another whole way? I mean, the days of Charlie Rose walking around naked, those days are over. He can just send pictures. He can Snapchat it. He can Snapchat the girls.
That worked out well for Anthony Weiner. Mike, but as coaches, how is this, what's your recommend? What do we need to do from the coaching perspective though?
I got to look at, I think I wrote a piece on my blog that I need to pull up and probably update it. One of the things that you need to do is you have to have a policy related to social media. You have to be, and it's interesting, and I've been very resistant. I do not want phones in the weight room. But so last night I took Mark and one of his friends to lift, and I was videoing them. And it's amazing how they love to watch the videos of themselves after they do the lift. So it's almost like I'm looking at it now and thinking, wow, I probably want a coach with a 64 gig iPhone who's constantly videoing kids, but who's not communicating with his friends via social media while he's coaching.
Yeah.
He's got this ability to automatically kind of video and review and show kids, hey, that was good. This is what this looks like. And they love it because that's their generation. Yet we have kids, there's no way we want those kids to have phones with them when they're on the floor. And it's just all of these policy things that you never thought you needed to have before. I think you need to have it, whatever the medium of choice is. And now it's Snapchat with kids. Okay, here's the policy. Everybody has to add everybody on Snapchat. I don't want you singling people out. I don't want exclusion. There's just a lot of stuff that you have to think about when you're trying to build teams, build camaraderie, because all these things are going to relate.
Yeah, I think maybe even like getting your coaches an iPad or a not an iPad because it's too expensive, but a tablet that has no almost doesn't have the internet, just to use the camera function. Right. Almost yeah, exactly. That would be a solution for that piece of it.
And you just hope also that you have people that are responsible enough to be able to not.
Yeah.
But again,
the problem,
our best thing to do is not have, even coaches don't have your phones on the floor because you're going to be texting people. You're going to be,
and you have interns too. So some of them are good and some of them are not. And then some of them are going to be, and you don't want that. But another thing is I still train once a week on Wednesdays. And what I did was I set up their programs because they have Monday and Friday or Saturday that they can work out. So they use the program that through their phone. So when they come in on Wednesdays, they're actually accessing their program through their phone. It's great for me as well, because I don't have any clipboards or anything that they have to carry around. So now they have their phone. So there is some good things about it, but like you said, you just got to trust them and say, okay, good.
The thing is, like with us, imagine our facility where we had 100 kids at a time and everybody's got their phone on them.
That'd be brutal.
It would be freaking distraction central.
Yeah.
It would be insane.
Yeah. All right, Coach. Well, that'll conclude the Strength Coach podcast portion of this, and we'll continue on with the rest. So thanks for doing this.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, hey guys, just want to remind you that Perform Better is having their holiday sale. Save up to 50%. That's going on till the end of the year. Everything's on sale. Tubing, mini bands, medicine balls, weight vests, foam rolls, ultimate sandbags, TRXs, you name it, it's on sale. Also, another cool thing, right now, today's Black Friday, they have free shipping on orders over $49. Obviously, some restrictions apply, so make sure you check those out. But that's going on until Cyber Monday, so make sure you check out the holiday sale with the Black Friday sale. Lots of stuff to save. All right, also they announced their lineup for the one-day Learn by Doing seminar. The first one is going to be this year in January 13th in New Jersey. Gray Cook, Brandon Marcello, Josh Hankin, and Robert Dos Remedios. You can check out the rest of the schedule at performbetter.com.
Hi, this is Eric DeGatti, and this is the Functional Movement segment. This is part 2 of a 3-part series titled The Power of 3. The Power of 3 is a system I came up with for on-your-feet movement that is based in 3 different components, all with 3 different elements to it. The first is foot position, either single leg, staggered stance, or open stance. The second is phases of movement, either acceleration, deceleration, or amortization/turnaround. And the third phase, or the third piece, I should say, being planes of movement, front and back sagittal plane, side-to-side frontal plane, or last but not least, rotational diagonal movement in the transverse plane. So what we're going to talk about in this segment is how we test that in what I call a ready-to-play test. And again, as I mentioned in the first segment, we'll use this with a healthy athlete to see what areas we want to address in their training, as well as with a athlete returning to play, that to make sure that there's no pain as we address getting them ready to work into reactive levels of game speed. So the first thing that we'll look at is we'll start with some simple deceleration drills. And with that, we're going to do single leg first, and we're going to ask them to do some hop outs. We'll either do right to left or left to right, and I'm going to have them do it at progressive levels of intensity. So I'm just going to have them balance on a single leg. They're going to hop out to their other leg. I'm going to tell them to do it about 50% intensity. If that's okay and there's no problem, then we're going to ramp it up to about 75%. And if all's still well and it's not a risk factor for them to continue further and there's no pain, we'll ask them to do it 100%, jump out as far as they can. I'm going to ask them to do that from right to left and left to right. I'm going to ask them to do that also, not just front and back, but side to side, as well as rotationally. From there, what we're going to do is I score this very similar to how we score the Selective Functional Movement Assessment, or the SFMA, where we're going to look at it whether it's functional or non-functional, meaning do they control their center of mass? Are they ending in an athletic position? And then most importantly, is there pain or no pain? So you can have people who do it great, but it's painful. You can have people who do it poorly and it's not painful, or any other combination of those different opportunities. Then from there, we're going to go to a staggered stance. We're going to have them at about a 5-yard run, and we're going to ask them to run at about 50% and then break down in a split or staggered stance with their right leg in front. We'll progress that then to 75% and then to 100%, once again, provided that they're doing it with enough form that it's non-painful and that it's not going to be a risk for them. We'll progress that right to left, and then we're also going to do a 5-yard side shuffle. Side shuffle to the right, break down in a staggered stance, side shuffle to the left. Same thing, same progression. 50%, 75, up to 100. Last but not least, we'll have them break down as if they're going to pivot and change directions in a 180 turn. We'll have them do that in that same progression. Now we've looked at staggered stance. What we're going to now look at is open stance. We'll have them do some stationary jumps, a max jump, as well as a repeat jump, where as soon as their feet hit the ground, they're tucking the knees to the chest and repeating there. That's going to be our open stance. And then we'll also have them break down out of a run into an open stance as well. Last but not least, we're then going to add a little bit of a reactive component, where we're going to have them then run and break down on either the right or left, and then have them change direction and go back. So they'll go from a front run to a back pedal. They'll go from a side shuffle, change direction hard, and come back and side shuffle the opposite direction. Or they'll do a forward run, pivot off their right, and run back the same direction, or pivot off their left. And then we're going to start with that where it's a set position they're going to, whether it's a cone or a line. And then eventually I want to add a reactive component, which is the last tier. And we're going to talk about this more in the third part of this series, where we talk about training, is we have to be able to get you to a reactive level, because that takes on a whole nother level of intensity. So I want to see if you can react on either my call or hand clap when you're going to change direction in those same tests that we just talked about. Once we have that, now we have a battery of probably about 28 different tests that we've done. And we're looking at which ones are, again, functional versus non-functional, meaning which ones are they able to hold a good athletic position and maintain their center of gravity. And most importantly, make sure that there's no pain in any of these tests. If there is pain in any of these tests, then we know that this athlete is not 100% and ready to play. And that's where we have to have a discussion with the athlete to say you may or may not be ready to go back on the field, even though your doctor and or your trainer or therapist has cleared you. This is going to be the type of speed and the type of environment that you're going to be out in the field with a whole nother layer of competition put on top of that. So I'm not sure if we can do it where if we can't go through without pain in a controlled environment like we have here, if you're going to be able to do it in an uncontrolled competitive environment on the field. So that's where we can start to clear and make sure somebody truly is ready to go back to play. And once they even are at that level, it's not going to go back and play a full weekend lacrosse tournament of hours on end of competition. It's going to be gradually ramping you back up into your level of play. But now we have a much better safety net to make sure you truly are ready to get back on the field. Now, once we do find deficits, if something is not functional within there, well, now we have to be able to train that. And that's what we're going to talk about in the third segment, is once we find faults within the Power of Three system, how do we go and address that from a training standpoint? Now, if we find something that's painful, well, that's something that needs to get cleared by a medical professional, because we don't know if that pain is just a stiff muscle or an unstable joint, or is there something that's clinically needing to be addressed in there? And that's not something as a fitness professional or strength coach that I can address. So the pain gets caught in another safety net for me to go back and have that checked before they're truly ready to go back on the field. Stay tuned for the next component where we talk about how to actually train the Power of Three and use the information you found in your Ready to Play test and put that to work. Once again, my name is Eric Agatti, and this has been the Functional Movement segment. Be sure to check us out for more information at www.functionalmovement.com.
It's Rachel Cosgrove with Results Fitness University here with the Strength Coach podcast on the Business of Fitness segment. And many times before, I've talked about the bigger picture, really figuring out maybe your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan, what's your mission, what's your vision, and really looking at, this big picture, which is so important. And I've talked about, different ways to do that or different ways to look at it and how, vision boards and things like that. But I know sometimes people have a hard time doing that. And I know, it can become, I've heard people say sometimes when they try to picture that bigger vision of where they're going or what that ideal day is like, it's kind of like, it's fuzzy, or they can't quite get a clear picture of it, or it's almost like they're underwater and they can't see it clearly. Like it's, hard to get super clear. And the more you practice it, the better, the more clear it will get, and the better you'll get at really clarifying that vision. But something that you want to start with to help that, something to really kind of take a back step and look at is how much you're filling your time and filling your energy with busyness. And sometimes when we're super busy focusing on the little things we have to get done every day, it becomes very difficult to sit back and look at that bigger vision. And so if you are having a hard time really picturing, where you want to go, where you want to take your business, or where you want to, what your ideal day is like, what kind of life you want to create, stop and do a little audit of your day and look through and just, figure out how am I spending my time? How am I spending my energy, and how am I spending my emotions? Because those are the three things that, really, as I stepped into more of a leadership role at Results Fitness and really that took on that visionary, mindset, though guarding my time, guarding my energy, and guarding my emotions were three of the biggest turning points for me. So really start to look at, where's my time going? Do a little time audit. Am I busy being busy? Are some of these things I could delegate and let go of? Am I, because this is keeping me from focusing on the bigger vision. And we've had a number of our mastermind members, as they join our group and they get systems in place and they start to delegate and they actually get free time and they don't know what to do with themselves. And they're like, I need to get busy again because I don't know what to do. And honestly, Alan and I at this point, the majority of our days are pretty simple. We don't have busy work. We don't have, a list of things to do. And so if you have, a really busy day, you want to start to move towards giving yourself some space, giving yourself some time to have that bigger picture thinking. Of course you can't think bigger picture when your time is used up by busyness. And then energy, really, where is your energy going? Do you have people around you that are sucking your energy? Because that will keep you from being able to focus on that bigger vision. So you got to start to, remove yourself from circles and situations, if there's people in your gym, if there's, if you have people that work for you or clients even that you're training that are sucking your energy, I strongly encourage you to fire those clients, and because that's going to allow you to free up that energy to be able to focus on your bigger vision. And then last, your emotions, really getting good at, compartmentalizing and being able to, if you do have personal stuff going on, can you compartmentalize that and really, keep that outside of the business and focus on your business when you need to. It's really whatever's going on with us personally many times tends to, and it always still will, affect our business. So really learning how to do those three things: guard your time, energy, and emotions, and just step back and, start to think about how can I simplify my life so that I can have more time to focus on my bigger vision. So just a wake up call for you guys. If you've had a hard time, really, maybe you've heard me talk about it in the past and you're like, yeah, great stuff. Like it's, woo woo. And she's talking about bigger vision and vision boards and yeah, whatever. I'm busy doing all my busy stuff. This is just your wake up call to, to check yourself and, maybe step back from that busy stuff and really take that time to look at your bigger vision. Make sure that those steps you are taking every single day are getting you closer to where you want to go. So hopefully that gives you guys some ahas, and I hope everyone has a great day, and I'll see you on the next segment. Have a great day. Again, Rachel Cosgrove with ResultsFitnessUniversity.com.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach, and we are back with Dr. Stu McGill and Brian Carroll, international powerlifting champion, talking about their collaboration on the book, The Gift of Injury, The Strength Athlete's Guide to Recovering from Back Injury and Winning Again. Last time we went over a lot of the explanation of Brian's injury and the story that led him to get to Dr. McGill, and the importance of buy-in and not beating it with lighter weight, the big three. And just really talking about one of the most important things was this idea of treating reps the same no matter what the weight is, and building, like Dr. McGill talked about last episode, building that capacity. Stuart, let's start off with, I think a lot of people we would look at Brian's injury and think, there's no way that this is just, you have to deal with it. There's no way you can rebuild it. And there's this idea of bone callousing. Can you talk to us about this kind of rebuilding and being able to remodel the bone?
Yes. Well, the overarching principle that we're talking about here is remodeling tissue, and then the programming, and most importantly, the deload schedule, because that's when the adaptation actually takes place. As we said in our previous episode, the bony injuries that Brian sustained were very, very substantial. And I'll just talk about the science of bone callousing and remodeling to start. If you can imagine breaking a long bone, say a humerus or a femur or something, maybe a radius, the bone in your forearm, the bone creates a callus over the fracture. It doesn't look very nice, but that callus now has created a stronger bone at that site than the uninjured bone. How this works is bone is a piezoelectric crystal. So you can remember maybe as a kid at camp, if you got two pieces of quartz and rubbed them together at night, you would see lightning flashes going through the quartz, because the quartz is a piezoelectric crystal. So it builds a charge when you stress it. Well, your bones create charges when you stress them. That's how your body knows where to lay down bone. So the charge occurs on the bone where the stress is, and then that charge sucks in negative ions of calcium and magnesium to lay them down and build bone. But if you then train immediately afterwards, you re-break the callus that you just formed with that newly laid down bone. You have to get it to form a scaffold and then let it stick for a little bit. So this was highly experimental. I'd only ever done it with a couple of other athletes, and then Brian came along and I said, well, the only way I know to do this, and it's highly experimental, is train just a little bit in the beginning to stimulate that piezoelectric charge, and then you've got to leave it alone for a few days. And I think that was his start. The scientist in me says, well, how do you know? It's a subject N of one. But that was the scientific principle. But then when you look at the difference between the great power lifters, the grand old men and women, and sorry, Brian, for calling you a grand old man, but you obviously have the validity in your success. When you study the training patterns of the grand old men and women in powerlifting, you will see in their programming, it's very intense, but there's a few days off in between to allow these adaptations to occur. The people who are powerlifters that are the duffers and then flame out with injury are the ones who train without appropriate deload cycles. But when you study the championship training program with the appropriate deloads, that is in fact almost a perfect bone callousing. So I'm not going to take any credit here. It was really Brian's professionalism and using what he had worked in the past to create this natural strengthening of bone. And it's quite impressive to look at his before and after MRIs showing how he filled in the bone in his fractured sacrum. He remodeled L5. And it's really a testament to how progressive and appropriate loading and movement can remodel tissue in a body.
It really is, and it's amazing. I'm reading a book right now called Rest by Alex Sujin Kim Pang, and I had finished Peak Performance by Brad Stolberg, kind of talking like the rest, really talking about the effect of rest on the brain and how important it is for us in a lot of other activities. But then Peak Performance talking more about this idea of, of having the rest, even like they brought up the 4-minute mile. His name is escaping me right now, but how he didn't run all week and came in, but the week before he didn't even run. He took that time off. People were shocked. They thought he would have been training all week for that. Obviously, his training he had relied on the training in his past and leading up to that. It just goes, and now to find out how important it is just with this idea of the bone callousing and remodeling. It's amazing. Brian, did you, was that just something that you felt like, were you doing that in the past, or you felt like, okay, no, I had to do this to kind of help rebuild this, or was it always something you had done in your training?
Okay, so specifically, I'd always deloaded in my training, and a deload is a way to stay ahead of beating yourself up too much. And I didn't know it at the time, but it's a way, we do stimulate microfractures in our bones, in our spine when we lift heavy. And it's not uncommon for powerlifters to have these types of fractures. The problem is when they turn into macrofractures and end up causing disability. So I'd always deloaded, but they weren't always properly put in, and I broke a lot of my rules along the way. So when I came back, I adhered to my principles in this book, Gift of Injury, 100%. And I deloaded before it was absolutely necessary. And what I mean by that is I backed off after the stimulation and gave my body time instead of just pushing through with ego and saying, oh, I feel good. Nothing hurts right now. I want to go heavier. I'm going to add more load, more load, more load. That's what you see on social media right now. You think people, they like to downplay a deload and say it's for sissies or for the weak or for the people that don't want it bad enough. You need to push harder. I have a 20-year powerlifting career that says differently, and almost a career-ending injury that says differently as well, because I wasn't always following these principles. But backing off and letting your body heal in so many different ways and different capacities is so huge. And it's one of the big things that I overlooked. And giving your body just enough stimulation and giving it time to heal is what strength training is all about. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that it's unnecessary. And I think both the real world validity and my experience and who the people I've worked with and Stu's science say otherwise pretty clearly.
Absolutely. Stu, can you go over the science of neural drive, and then I want Brian to talk about kind of achieving neural drive and that application of it.
Yes. Well, neural drive is the term I use for the stimulation of muscle. So when you think about movement and muscle activation, it starts as a thought in the brain. And that thought gets transferred into nerve impulses that travel down the nerves, the motor nerves, and then the muscle responds with an appropriate contraction. So I'm very highly simplifying this, by the way. So if you want to create strength, you've got to look at all three elements. So in the mind, you need to create a very dense thought to densify the nerve impulses. So there's a lot of tricks to that. For example, we've documented that when you smile or if you have a happy demeanor, that puts a damper on the neural drive being output by the motor cortex. In fact, when you put on a game face, or if we can take you to the level of fight or flight, which is what a lot of power lifters do to create that neural drive and those strong mental thoughts, now we've created the densest neural drive at the source. Then the trick is to get the nerves to carry the density. So now we use exercises like heavy grinding exercises, perhaps bench press, where you go to the sticking point and you grind, you spread the bar, you squeeze the bar, you bend the bar, you work on whole body stiffness, total drive to train this notion of carrying, building the hardware in the nervous system to carry very dense neural drive. Other tricks might be go to lockout and really load heavy and just support that load and work with real focus through your body. Anyway, we describe the hardware aspect in the book. Then to get the muscles to complete the full chain and respond with maximum strength. Well, there's all kinds of tricks there, but I can tell you one thing, when you have pain, it's a natural inhibition to that muscle responding. So we were talking earlier about the 2 stages. It's absolutely non-negotiable. You've got to get rid of the pain if we're going to create that strength athlete. Now we've got full response of the muscle. How the muscles co-contract is extremely important, and we tune that to the levers of the person and all the rest of it. But anyway, there's a little bit of a start on the discussion of neural drive, and in Brian's case, we work with what we had. If you go back and study Brian's lifting style from the days before he saw me, which is what, we do. I went back on YouTube and I watched him lift. And he was a strength speed lifter. And that was, maybe he didn't realize it. He only knew it because it worked. But he would lift with a pulse of speed. That in of itself was densifying the neural drive. So maybe Brian wants to take over from here, but absolutely to do some speed training is another principle that we describe to densify the neural drive and achieve that ultimate strength.
Can you expand on that and how you used it?
Yeah, so I didn't always lock everything in top to bottom. We talked about how I was casual at time. One thing that Stu demonstrated to me in the lab clinic in 2013, and I use this now when I try to get my point across to someone, is the handshake. The handshake top to bottom, 100% drive. When you go to shake someone's hand and you're trying to really apply some force to it, it isn't just a matter of walking up, smiling, and grabbing with your forearm and your hand and squeezing hard with your thumb. It's a matter of rooting into the floor, gripping the floor, head to toe tightness, grim look on your face, and you are actually trying to smash the guy's hand and pull it off of his arm. You don't do that with a smile on your face. And I talk about this a little bit and compare it to the UFC fighters. When you see guys that are getting tagged in the octagon and they start smiling and acting like they're not getting hurt, they're getting really hurt. When the guy's walking in with the killer instinct and has a guy in a corner and he's tagging him, the guy doing the tagging is not smiling. He's got a killer look on his face. He smells blood, and there's no happiness about him, and it will ruin him. It's a distraction. So you see people online or in videos or at competitions that are happy-go-lucky and smiley walking up to the bar, and that's not going to summon the amount of force that they could potentially put out because they're not using everything at their disposal.
I really like that because I honestly had no idea about the happiness thing because, again, we're trying as coaches and trainers, a lot of us are trying to make these sessions fun, right? And so sometimes though, when you're starting to pick up some heavier weight, that's obviously not really a good idea.
Right. And it's one of those things that, think about it, when you, and I'm not a fighter, but I've followed fighting for a long time, and I know quite a few professional fighters. When you have any kind of a flight or fight instance where two people are having an argument or about to have a fight in the octagon or other, who do you think's usually going to win? The person that's mean and locked in and focused, or the person that's smiling? Who's going to be able to put out the most force? Now, I'm not saying someone who's wild and it's going to be crazy, but two trained killers, the person with the grim, focused look on their face is usually going to be the one that's going to attack and do the damage, not the person smiling and being lackadaisical.
Absolutely. Stu, can you go over the torso brace? I think a lot of us, we've heard about the torso brace and the stiffening, the abdominal brace and the stiffening, but I really haven't focused on this idea of the torso brace. Can you talk to us about what it is and how it kind of plays together with the abdominal brace?
Yeah, well, the answer there, Ant, I have to start with this notion of it depends. I mean, are we talking about the average client of a trainer, maybe a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids, and their biggest lift is picking out the child at 2 o'clock in the morning from a crib for feeding? So that is one answer to your question, or one example. Or we take a person like Brian, who's going to be lifting over half a ton. The idea of bracing is totally different. So if I can just take those 2 examples, is that all right, Andy?
Yeah, that'd be great because we have a lot of diverse lifters here. So,
yeah, the answer to your question really follows a broad spectrum. So for when a person is in pain, they are naturally bracing usually. That's how they have found, they hold their breath and they hold their muscles because they find that this is somehow relieving of their pain. Now, some people get into patterns where they're way over braced and they don't get out of pain. So we have to back off and give them drills and coaching to back off, and then be very strategic. So I'll give you an example of a test. I might tell them, completely relax. Stand and go up on your toes and then bounce down on your heels. So that's a compressive load down a person's spine of about 1.5 times body weight. If they say, yeah, that triggered my pain a little bit, I'll say, good. Now, I have them push their fingers into their lateral oblique muscles, about the level of the navel, but maybe 4 or 5 inches or 6 inches beside that out laterally. Now I say, poke your fingers into your abdominal wall and push your fingers out. Now, when you measure that neural response, people not only activate their abdominal wall, but they also activate their back muscles. And you'll find there'll be just a beautiful tuning there. And then you say, keep that pressure on your fingers, pushing out, activating those muscles. Now repeat the bounce test on your heels. Is your pain better or worse? If they say, oh, my pain's better, or the pain may be even gone, you have just found a stiffening pattern that takes their pain away. But the person might say, it's rare, but they might say, you know what, that increases my pain. So you've just created proof that particular bracing pattern was not appropriate for them. It was too much compression for the little bit of stability that they got. So I might say, do an anti-shrug. Pull down with your pecs and lats. Compress down from above. Let your belly go. Now repeat the heel drop. And they might say, that's what took my pain away. So you see, it's a moving target sometimes, but we give tools in the book that allow the person to converge on the appropriate bracing technique and how intense that bracing technique. It might be to back off, it might be to add just a little bit. So that's for the person who's in pain. And obviously that's where Brian started. And then as Brian started to morph into his performance training phase 2 programming, we need a tremendous stiffness. The spine is a flexible rod. So look, if you're going to be a dancer, go ahead. We will train mobility in your back, but we can't impose too much strength to it. Because when you do a lot of mobility training in your back, when you measure the very mobile dancers, you find that they can't bear much load. They're not very strong. And the reason is they've adapted the discs in their spine to be flexible. So be it. That's great. But you cannot do that to a power lifter. You need to stiffen the collagen because these aren't ball and socket joints. When you examine the science of that governs their longevity, they act as fabric. They are layered fabrics of fibers, and those fibers need to be stiff to bear the supreme load. So now we get into bracing patterns that are much more intense to allow that flexible rod not to move. Now that does two things. It increases the load tolerance of the spine, but it then also creates a stiff chunk of steel. So when the hips drive the power lifts, the squat and the power, or just any lift from the floor, the great ones, and we've measured this, create tremendous power in the hips and transmit it through a stiffened torso. A movement in the torso, when you're under 1,000 pounds, is the end. You cannot correct 2 or 3 millimeters of a mistake in line of drive. It will crush you. So we get into supreme stiffness, and Brian will talk about the techniques that we describe. When you're getting into the lifter's wedge, you grip the floor with your feet. You start to spread the floor to really engage the hip musculature. And then from the top down, you grip the bar very intensely, and you start to bend the bar to really engage latissimus dorsi down to the sacrum, etc. So there's two different examples to answer the same question and how specific they are to achieving the pain-free performance in that person.
Great, Brian. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so one thing that I did right away, and I still do to this day, is I would use the lifter's wedge. I would brace while I was putting the toilet seat down for my wife because I'm such a great husband, or picking it up or whatever. I would grab it with good form. I would slide my hands down my thigh, grip my knee. I would pull my pecs down, pull my lats down. Same with brushing my teeth. Same thing. I would maybe lean on the counter with one hand, keep a nice neutral spine. And no matter what I did, I would utilize this wedge. And so it became second nature, obviously, when I'm loading my body with, 800-pound deadlifts, once I was healed up, it became natural. So the lifter's wedge it's essential for everything. And for me, it's part of my day-to-day life, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm picking up a couch cushion or whether I'm picking up an 800-pound deadlift. Nothing's casual.
And can I just add a very important point to add on to Brian's point for your listeners? Pain corrupts movement patterns. Pain creates chronic muscle contracture and facilitation of some muscles. We've proven this. I mean, the many ideas were proposed by Vladimir Yonda. We proved that he was right. So not only does pain facilitate and activate some muscles, but it inhibits and shuts off others. So to correct these patterns, what Brian described was reestablishing the patterns. These are called movement engrams. These are the default habits of people. We need, as Brian described, you go back And every time you move, you follow a pattern, and that's what gets encoded in the brain. Now, those very much are part and parcel with restoring the pain-free patterns that will create the training capacity. So that's the neuroscience description of why it's so important.
Guys, I want to step back one more time on the neural drive, and you had a little section using speed to reach 100% neural drive. Can you explain that, expand on that?
Well, I'll give some examples. When we study the patterns of the super athletes, I think back to the days of Vasily Alexiev, the great super heavyweight Olympic lifter from Russia. More records than any other top heavyweight lifter. He would pick up a load, and the load would be about 30% of his PR, and throw it high into the air, very explosive speed. Well, when we measure lifts like that, you find that you overdrive that density that I was talking about. Speed creates a neurology of super driving the pulse patterns. Would you do that with a heavyweight? I hope not. But it's all part of creating that neural drive. So as I said, before I ever met Brian, I knew this was naturally in his style. But for both of those reasons, he reincorporated all of the speed back into his training. So I'll let you take over now, Brian.
Yeah, so I've always been a very fast lifter, quick, explosive. One of my weak points is I'm not a great grinder. So as I assessed my training over time, talking with people like Stu and other people that I respect and bounce ideas off of, I had to learn to grind. And so Stu's example of grinding through weak points and the bench press with a half bench press and bending the bar and really activating 100% neural drive, for me was really, really good. And for me, speed off the floor is something that I'm really good at. Speed out of the hole, for the squat and out of the bench press. And deadlift off the floor, I'm incredibly fast. And it's good practice. You create those motor patterns that become second nature, and you have to use lighter weight. Westside Barbell advocates about 50% for speed work. The superweight heavyweight champion that Stu's talking about used around 30%, but you don't do that with 60, 70, 80%. It's just not something you do. That's strength training at that point, not speed training. So depending on what your weak points are, what you struggle with, speed work and practicing that neural drive is very, very important, especially if you're a slow lifter. I'm sure both of you have seen, obviously, some lifters that are really slow and finish strong, and then you have other lifters that are really, really fast, and they make both of their 100% attempts look very differently. You might see a faster lifter like myself that gets the drive out of the hole so quick, blow through a lift, and you say, man, that guy has 100 pounds left, whereas one person might grind through lift after lift after lift and keep being successful. So I think we're all wired a little bit different. And for me, being a fast twitch lifter, more explosive, I think it's a great asset. But not everyone's going to be naturally gifted to do that. And practicing that speed work for some will really help them.
Brian, this might be a stupid question, but it kind of sounds a little like Olympic lifting. I mean, were you incorporating some of that into the training as well, or no?
No Olympic lifting, but I take principles from every wise athlete and experienced athlete, and if they can apply to my training, I will test some things out. I do have my own strength training philosophy, and I've been very successful at that, but that doesn't mean that I stopped learning. So anything that I can pick up from other Olympic champions and gold medalists and other powerlifting greats, I'll certainly consider it.
Okay, great. Stu, let's go into we're gonna not finish up completely, but we're getting there. The general programming for the trainers out there. So we know stage 1 is getting them out of pain. Okay, we talked about that. What's next from a general perspective in terms of programming? I know it's obviously this is going to be it depends too, but from a general perspective, like what's the next step getting them out of pain after?
Yeah. Well, I can give an algorithm that we describe in the book. First of all, it's really important. Well, you have to assess the athlete, but it's really important to begin the assessment just by talking to them and get an understanding of, as Brian just said, are they a grinding athlete? Are they a speed athlete? What's their injury history? What are their goals? All of these things to really help hone the purpose of the programming. The second part, which is a specialty of ours, is the pain provocation. So the average trainer isn't going to be doing that. But then the third part is the algorithm that every program has to start from. First of all, you have to know the sport. What is it that the person is trying to adapt and train their body to do? So I could use a powerlifting example. I could use a hammer throwing example or a hockey player example. It doesn't matter. But you have to know what that sport demands and requires that the athlete have for success. And we've done different studies. I think of sprinting, Dan Paff, how he's done experiments to show what is needed to be the fastest sprinter, as an example. So you've got to know the sport. But then go and measure the athlete for their ability to have those critical elements. And then it's quite simple after that. On one half of your page, you've written down what they need. On the other half, you've written down what they currently have. You'll see very quickly what they're missing. Now the program becomes, you focus on what they're missing first, the critical elements that they're missing, and then you say, what's the best tool I have in my training toolbox to fulfill that need for the athlete? What has the highest risk reward, etc. So when you take someone like a power lifter, and we gave several examples in the book. You know, what's required? Well, number one, torso stiffness. We don't want torso mobility. We've got to lock up that torso to free performance, but to make it load resilience. Then we add tuned mobility. Now people say, well, you're going to stretch the hips. No, it's tuned mobility. More hip mobility is a liability, just as not enough is. We need just enough hip mobility so when they're pulling the bar from the floor, they go down into the lifter's wedge to the legal depth. We want them to be elastically tight. We want them to pull down into the last few degrees. So now they get elastic recoil assisting the muscular active effort. There are too many power lifters with insufficient hand grip. You know, when I see them training with straps or they're doing false grips over unders on very light loads, and they haven't built their hands yet. If they can create better grip strength, they will get more torso stiffness as they bend the bar and engage the lats and all the rest of it. Then the absolute essential variable or characteristic of steering the force through your body, getting the thrust line as close to joints as you possibly can. There will be some tuning of the body to optimize that. Or here's a funny example. What kind of shoes should they wear? I get asked all the time, well, do I lift barefoot, ballet slippers, Chuck Taylors, or lifting shoes? The answer always is, it depends. I don't know the answer, but I sure know how to get there. And what I would do is say, take a pair of shoes and tie them as tightly as you possibly can. Really bind up your feet. Now go lift. Now do the polar opposite. Lift barefoot and see how you do. Bracket it. and you'll start to learn what your body responds to. And there's no single answer here. People get form camps and, oh, it's always this way or that way. It never is that way in the human condition. But anyway, we describe in the book how to converge on the program, and those are some of the elements that we discuss.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a great the chapter. It follows the general programming into Brian's programming, and it's pretty in depth. And like I said, in section 4, could be like a book on its own, just for some of these cueing and coaching techniques. But I do want to finish up with, I guess, Brian, just kind of knowing what you know now. I mean, you had a it's hard to say like what would you have changed, because you had so much success, but do you feel like what would you have changed really, like in terms of to a younger powerlifter, somebody who's coming up, somebody who's into the coaches out there to try and help people? What would you have changed kind of getting into this and with the programming?
That's a tough question, because on one hand, I would have liked to avoid a lot of the mental anguish and the physical pain that I went through, and had a little bit more success early on, if you will, because I was hurt here and there. On the other hand, I wouldn't be in this position right now talking to you, Ant and Stu, discussing how we can help people all over the world avoid the same issues that I self-inflicted in many ways, and in some ways they weren't so self-inflicted. And had to overcome. So because of all that, we put together an awesome book that is unlike anything out there in many different ways. And in my opinion, section 4 could stand alone as well as section 2 could. But to answer your question, I don't know. I'm thankful for the position I'm in. So I can kind of answer that both ways. I would have definitely moved better. I would have been more patient. I would have constructed short-term goals a little bit better to see my long-term goals through. I would have planned properly, a little more efficient training cycles at a time, so I didn't create those macro fractures. And I would have definitely competed a little bit less and been good to my body, or better to my body day to day. I also would have kept my body weight a bit lighter. But because of all this, I'm in a much better position. And I wouldn't have learned so much from Dr. McGill and many other people during this hard time, time full of ups and downs. And now it's actually a really good thing that all this happened. So I wouldn't say that I would do things any differently because of the position that I'm in right now, and I'm really in a good place. So I don't mean to dance around your question at all, but definitely if people read this book, they can, instead of going my path, they can circumvent a lot of the damage that I did and a lot of the hard times I went through. I mean, in the open, we're very real. I wrote how I really felt at that time after being shot down time after time trying to find a solution as I was in the Baptist hospital parking lot. So, tough times build tough men, and life is all about learning. So, again, I hope that's a decent answer for you, but I don't have too many regrets. I regret the people that suffered along with me, my wife for sure, because it wasn't an easy time for her as I was in pain and depressed and going through the ups and downs with that. But the position I'm in now is a position that I would not be in if it weren't for what I went through.
Absolutely. And I think one of I'm not sure if you guys realize the benefits of this book is, for me, it was pretty inspiring. Just the story, the way you guys did this and coming out with Brian's story. And I think it gives people hope. That's why I feel like this is such an important book, because I wanted to give it to a friend who's a strong man, but I don't want to give it to him now because I think he's going to get depressed because he got surgery. And I'm like, I don't want to give it to him because he might get mad that he got it. But I think this is a really super inspiring book. Never mind all the nuggets, and it's amazing. Like you said, section 2, section 4 can be standalone on their own. So, Stu, you've done it again. Guys, Brian, thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking so much time to kind of go over everything. And guys, listen, there's so much more in this book that we could have been on here for another 3 hours talking about this. So guys, I really appreciate you coming on and spending so much time with us.
Thank you, Ant. It was great to meet you. I enjoyed this for sure. I'm sure Stu did. And anytime you want me on or need something from me, you know how to get a hold of me.
Yeah, and from me, and thanks again for all you do and your work at Strength Coach. It's really valuable for the listeners. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks again, guys. All right, that's going to do it for episode 220 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Special thanks to Chris Poirier and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, right now, they're having their holiday sale, 30 to 50% off selected items, combined with the Black Friday through Cyber Monday sale, so there's free shipping on orders over $49 as well. Restrictions do apply, so check it out. Go to performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars. Remember, they announced all the lineups for the one-day seminars. Thanks to Coach Boyle, Dr. Stuart McGill, and Brian Carroll for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning and performance enhancement. Don't forget, you can get the book Gift of Injury 10% off at backfitpro.com. Use the code BFPFriends. All right, Rachel Cosgrove, thank you for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Eric Tagati and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. And of course, remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out for 3 days. Just $1, you'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. My name's Anthony Renna. Go to continuefit.com for all of my podcasts and sign up for the Success Series 5 audio interviews on success in the fitness business. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.